orc women flee the storm to a poor human's home. One whispered, "He is mine." The storm hit like the gods were settling old debts, the kind of storm that makes trees reconsider their life choices about staying rooted, that turns roads into rivers and makes even the bravest travelers look for the nearest door to knock on. Which is exactly what brought 4 orc warriors to Rupert Holloway's cabin on a night when the world was doing its best impression of the end of times. Rupert was stirring a pot of watery stew, mostly potatoes, a bit of turnip, and hope, when he heard the pounding on his door. Not knocking. Pounding. The kind that says, "Open up or we're coming through anyway." He froze, wooden spoon halfway to his mouth, because nobody came out this far unless they were lost, desperate, or hunting him. And given that he was a poor farmer with nothing worth stealing except maybe his 3 chickens and a stubborn goat, hunting seemed unlikely. The pounding came again, harder this time. Rupert set down the spoon and walked to the door, his hand hovering over the latch. Outside, lightning cracked the sky open like an egg, and in that brief flash of white light, he saw them through the small window. 4 shapes. Tall, armed, green, orcs. His first instinct was the same one every human had when faced with orcs at their door: run. His second instinct, the one that came a heartbeat later, was, where exactly would he run to in the middle of a storm that was trying to murder the landscape? So he did the only thing that made sense, which was also the stupidest thing possible. He opened the door. The wind hit him first, nearly ripping the door from his hands. Then the rain, cold and sharp as thrown daggers. And then he saw them properly. 4 orc women, fully armed and armored, standing in his doorway like judgment had arrived, wearing leather and carrying axes. The one in front, tallest, oldest, with a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, stared at him with the kind of eyes that had seen things Rupert couldn't imagine and didn't want to. Her hand rested on the pommel of a sword that looked like it had ended more arguments than it had lost. "We need shelter," she said, not asking, stating a fact. The storm. Rupert looked at her, then at the 3 warriors behind her, then at the storm that was currently trying to dismantle reality, then back at her. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The lead warrior's eyes narrowed, like she'd expected an argument, and didn't know what to do with compliance. "You're letting us in? Just like that? Storm's trying to kill you," Rupert said, raising his voice over the wind. "I'm not about to help it." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. But she nodded once and stepped inside. The other 3 followed, bringing with them the smell of rain, leather, steel, and something else. Something that smelled like battlefields and long roads and places Rupert had never been. He shut the door, and suddenly his small cabin felt impossibly smaller. 4 orc warriors, armed and dripping, stood in his main room, taking up space the way mountains take up horizons. They were shorter than he expected, roughly his height, maybe an inch or 2 different in either direction. But they had the kind of presence that made you forget about measurements and focus on the fact that they could probably break you in half without trying hard. "I'll get more wood for the fire," Rupert said, because he needed something to do with his hands that wasn't shaking. "And towels. I have towels." The lead warrior watched him with those battlefield eyes. "You're not afraid." "I'm terrified," Rupert corrected, pulling blankets from a chest. "But you needed shelter, and I have a roof. Seems simple enough." One of the warriors, the youngest-looking one, with her black hair in intricate braids, snorted softly. "Simple. He says it's simple." "Necra," the leader said quietly. Just the name, but it carried weight. The young warrior fell silent. Rupert handed out towels and blankets, trying not to think about the fact that any one of these women could probably snap him like a twig. They accepted the offerings with nods, wiping rain from their faces and armor. That's when he noticed the way one of them, not the leader, the one with the red war paint across her cheekbones, was staring at him. Not the way the others were looking, which was the cautious assessment warriors gave potential threats. This was different, more intense, like she was trying to solve a problem written on his face. "There's stew," Rupert said, gesturing to the pot. "Not much, but it's hot." The leader raised an eyebrow. "You feed us too? You're in my home during a storm that sounds like it's trying to punch holes in the sky." "Yes, I feed you." He paused. That's what you do." The 4th warrior, the one who'd been murmuring numbers under her breath since entering, spoke up. "Dulgra calculates you have approximately 1 bowl per person, given pot size, which means you go without if you feed us all." Rupert looked at her, Dulgra apparently, then shrugged. "I'll eat tomorrow. Storm won't last forever." Silence fell. broken only by rain hammering the roof like it had a personal grudge against shelter. Thraka, the warrior with red paint, finally spoke, addressing the leader. Her voice had weight to it, like words being pulled from a deep well. He doesn't recognize me. The leader, Thraka, glanced at her, then back at Rupert. Should he? The warrior stepped forward, into the better light of the fire. She reached up slowly, giving Rupert time to see it wasn't a threat, and pushed aside the leather strap across her shoulder. Beneath it, visible through a tear in her shirt, was a scar. A nasty one, puckered and old, running along her ribs. The kind of scar that said, "You almost died here." 5 years ago, she said quietly. The border skirmish near Thornwood. You found me bleeding in a ditch. Rupert stared at the scar, then at her face, and slowly, like fog lifting, he remembered. Not the face. He'd barely seen her face. She'd been covered in mud and blood and rain, not so different from tonight's storm. But he remembered the wound, remembered thinking no one survived that kind of bleeding, remembered tearing his own shirt to make bandages, using the linen cloth to pack the wound, dragging her under an overturned cart for shelter, while soldiers from both sides searched for survivors to kill. You, he breathed. You lived. Because of you. The warrior's hand moved to her chest, pressed against the armor over her heart. You gave me shelter. Bandaged wounds. Didn't ask if I was enemy. Didn't ask for payment. Didn't ask for name. You were dying, Rupert said simply. Seemed rude to ask questions. The young one, Nekra, made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else entirely. The warrior with the scar didn't look away from Rupert. In orc culture, she said slowly, life debt is sacred. More than gold. More than steel. More than blood oath. She paused. My name is Moksha Ironfang, and I have carried your debt for 5 years. Thraka's hand had moved to her sword, not threatening, but ready. Dolgra had stopped murmuring numbers. Nekra had straightened, suddenly very interested. The air in the cabin felt thicker, heavier, like the storm had somehow gotten inside. I didn't save you for debt, Rupert said quietly. I saved you because it was right. I know. Moksha's voice was steady, but something in her eyes wasn't, which makes the debt even greater. Because you gave without asking, expected nothing, wanted nothing. She reached inside her armor, and every instinct Rupert had screamed weapon, but what she pulled out wasn't steel. It was cloth. Old, worn, stained with something dark that had turned brownish-green with age. His linen cloth, the one he'd used to save her life. I kept this, she said. I carried it for 5 years. Every battle, every march, every night. Reminder of debt unpaid. The storm raged outside. Inside, silence. Moksha looked at her sisters, then back at Rupert. And when she spoke next, her voice carried through the cabin like a bell, clear and undeniable. He is mine. Nekra's eyes went wide. Dolgra stopped breathing mid-calculation. Thraka's hand tightened on her sword, but not in threat. In shock. Moksha, Thraka said carefully. You know what you're saying. I know what I'm saying. Rupert looked between them, understanding nothing except that something significant had just happened, and he was at the center of it without knowing the rules. I'm sorry, I don't understand. What does that mean? It was Dolgra who answered, her voice thoughtful. In orc culture, life debt can be paid many ways. Gold, service, blood. She paused. Or claim. Claim, Rupert repeated. She's claiming you, Nekra said, and there was something in her tone that might have been awe, or might have been concern. As hers. Under orc law, witnessed by sisters, that's a bond. She looked at Moksha. Sister, are you certain? Because you can't take that back. Moksha didn't look away from Rupert. I'm certain. I've been certain for 5 years. Just didn't know it until I saw his face again. Moksha, Thraka's voice was gentle but firm. He's human. He lives in a cabin with 3 chickens and furniture held together by hope. He doesn't understand our ways. Doesn't know what claiming means. Then I'll teach him. Moksha took a step closer to Rupert, and he felt the intensity of her presence like heat from a forge. You saved my life without wanting anything. I'm giving you everything. That's how life debt works when the debt becomes something else. Something else, Rupert echoed faintly. She loves you, you absolute fool, Nekra said, exasperated. She's been carrying your bloody cloth against her heart for 5 years, talking about the human who showed kindness when the world showed steel. We all knew. We just thought she'd, move on. Get over it. Not declare a formal claim in front of witnesses the moment she saw your face again. Moksha's jaw tightened. Nekra. What? I'm helping. He looks confused. I am confused, Rupert admitted. The room was spinning slightly and not from the storm. You're saying? What exactly are you saying? Moksha held up the cloth, stained with her blood and his kindness. I'm saying you saved my life. I'm saying I've thought about you every day for 5 years. I'm saying that debt became something deeper when I wasn't looking. And I'm saying that in orc culture, when a warrior claims someone, witnessed by their sisters, it's binding. She paused. If they accept. If I accept, Rupert repeated. If you accept. The storm hammered the roof. The fire crackled. 4 orc warriors stood in his cabin, waiting for his answer to a question he didn't fully understand. I don't have anything, Rupert said quietly. I'm a poor farmer. I have this cabin, 3 chickens, a goat that hates everyone, and a field that barely feeds me. I don't know your culture, don't know your ways. Don't know what claiming even means, really. It means, Moksha said, and her voice was softer now, that you're mine to protect, mine to provide for, mine to stand beside. It means I've chosen you, and I won't unchoose you. It means, she hesitated, and for the first time he saw vulnerability in her eyes. It means I'm asking if you'll have me, even though I'm orc, even though I'm warrior, even though this makes no sense to your world or mine. Rupert looked at her, really looked, at the scar he'd given her by refusing to let her die, at the cloth she'd carried for 5 years, at the way she stood like she was ready to fight the world but terrified of his answer. Why me? He asked. I'm nobody, just a farmer who did what anyone should do. That's why, Moksha said simply, because you think kindness is what anyone should do, when most people wouldn't cross a road to help an enemy, because you opened your door tonight without hesitation, because you offered food you can't spare to warriors who could take it by force, because you're good, Rupert Holloway, and goodness is rarer than any treasure. His name. She knew his name. He didn't remember telling her, but she'd learned it somehow, kept it like she'd kept the cloth. I'm scared, Rupert said honestly. So am I, Moksha replied. I don't know what I'm agreeing to. Neither do I, really. This has never happened before. Thraka cleared her throat. Actually, there was that one time in not helping Thraka, Moksha said without looking away from Rupert. The storm raged. The cabin held, and Rupert Holloway, poor farmer with 3 chickens and a stubborn goat, looked at the orc warrior who'd carried a piece of his kindness against her heart for 5 years, and said the only thing that made sense, which was also probably the stupidest thing possible. Yes. The word hung in the air like a bell's echo. Moksha's eyes widened. Yes? Yes. I accept. Whatever claiming means, whatever this is, yes. Because you carried that cloth for 5 years, and that means something. Because you're standing here terrified, I'll say no, and that means something. Because, he smiled, small and uncertain, because maybe I'm tired of being alone in a cabin with 3 chickens, and maybe you're the least alone I've felt in a very long time. Nekra whooped. Dolgra murmured something that sounded like probability of success, higher than calculated. Thraka shook her head but smiled, and Moksha pressed the blood-stained cloth to her heart and smiled like sunrise. There are rituals, she said, traditions. Things that should be done properly. Do them later, Rupert said. Right now there's stew getting cold, a storm trying to break my roof, and 4 warriors who need feeding. He paused. 5 people who need feeding. Moksha caught the change. From 4 to 5. From them to us. 5, she agreed softly. They ate stew that was more water than substance, sat around a fire that barely heated the cabin, listened to a storm that screamed its fury at the world. Thraka told stories of battles. Nekra showed off her collection of stones, explaining which came from which fight. Dolgra calculated the exact probability of the roof collapsing. 17%, she announced, which wasn't as comforting as she seemed to think. And Moksha sat beside Rupert, close enough that their shoulders touched, the blood-stained cloth now tied around her wrist where everyone could see it. What happens now? Rupert asked quietly, while the others debated whether Nekra's stone from the Battle of 3 Bridges was actually from that battle or from a river. Now, Moksha said, we figure it out. Together. She looked at him, and in the firelight, her eyes were warm. Fair warning, orc courtship is complicated. Lots of rituals, tests, challenges. My clan will want to meet you, test you. Make sure you're worthy. Am I worthy? Rupert asked. You're the human who saved my life without asking for anything, who opened his door in a storm, who shared his last meal with strangers who could have been enemies. Moksha smiled. You're the worthiest person I know, but my clan won't care about that until they test you themselves. It's tradition. What kind of tests? Strength, endurance, wisdom, ability to provide. She paused. Also, there's usually a drinking contest, but we can probably skip that one. I can't win a drinking contest against orcs. Nobody can. That's why we can skip it. Rupert laughed, surprising himself. This is insane. Completely, Moksha agreed. But insanity witnessed by sisters and accepted by both parties is binding. So, she held out her hand. Are you ready to be insane with me? Rupert looked at her hand. Calloused, scarred, strong enough to break steel and gentle enough to cradle hope. He took it. Ready, he said. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cabin, something new was beginning. Something that made no sense to human culture or orc tradition. Something that happened when a life debt became something deeper. When kindness got repaid in the only way that mattered. When a poor farmer with nothing to his name became the most important thing in a warrior's world. The storm eventually passed, like all storms do. Dawn came cold and clear, painting the world in shades of beginning again. Moksha stood at the door with her sisters preparing to leave, but her hand stayed in Rupert's. I'll come back, she promised. With my clan. To do this properly. To make this real in the eyes of our people. She paused. Will you wait? Rupert looked at his cabin, his field, his 3 chickens and stubborn goat, his life of quiet poverty and simple routines. Then he looked at Moksha, warrior who carried a blood-stained cloth like a treasure, who claimed him with the same certainty she wielded her blade. I'll wait, he said. How long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Depends on how fast my clan can march. She squeezed his hand. And Rupert, when they come, when they test you, don't try to be warrior. Don't try to be orc. Just be who you are. The human who saved an enemy and didn't ask for thanks. That's the person I claimed. That's the person I want. She kissed his hand, a gesture that made Necra whistle and Thraka groan. And then they were gone. 4 warriors walking into the morning like legends returning to their proper stories. Rupert stood in his doorway long after they disappeared. His hand still tingled where Moksha had kissed it. His heart still pounded like he'd survived something dangerous and wonderful. His future had just become something he couldn't predict and couldn't control. 3 weeks later they came. Not just Moksha and her 3 sisters, the entire clan. 200 orcs marching up to his cabin with banners flying and drums beating. Rupert stood in his doorway, absolutely terrified, watching an army approach because a woman had decided he was worth claiming. Moksha rode at the front, beside a massive orc who could only be the chief. She'd told Rupert about him in their brief time together. Her father, the war leader, the one who would test him hardest. When they stopped, the chief dismounted and walked forward, and Rupert tried very hard not to look like he was about to faint. You're the human, the chief said. Not a question. I'm Rupert Holloway, sir. Sir. The chief smiled, and it wasn't entirely friendly. My daughter claims you, says you saved her life, says you're worthy. He looked Rupert up and down, taking in the patched clothes, the worn boots, the cabin that was barely standing. I see a poor farmer with nothing. That's what I am, Rupert said honestly. Then why? The chief asked. Should I allow this claim? Rupert thought about lying, about exaggerating, about trying to be something he wasn't. Then he remembered Moksha's words. Just be who you are. You shouldn't, Rupert said. By every logical measurement, I'm a terrible choice. I'm poor. I'm human. I don't know your culture or your ways. I can't win in combat or tests of strength. I can't provide riches or status. He paused. But I can promise this. I'll never ask her to be less than she is. I'll never stop being amazed that she chose me. And I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of the faith she showed when she carried my blood-stained cloth for 5 years. Silence. The entire clan waited. The chief stared at Rupert for a long moment. Then he turned to Moksha. Daughter, this is your final chance. Choose differently. Choose warrior. Choose wealth. Choose someone who makes sense. Moksha looked at her father, then at Rupert, then back at her father. I choose the human who saved me without knowing my name. I choose the farmer who shared his last meal with strangers. I choose the man who said yes even though he was terrified. I choose him, father. Today and always. The chief sighed. You've inherited my stubbornness. He looked at Rupert. There will be tests, challenges, hardships. My people will judge you every day. Some will never accept you. This will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, Rupert said. The chief snorted. Then slowly he smiled. "Welcome to the clan, Rupert Holloway. Try not to die during the tests." The ceremony that followed was nothing like human weddings. There was ritual combat. Rupert lost spectacularly, but earned respect for not giving up. There was a test of wisdom. Rupert somehow passed by, pointing out that the riddle had 2 answers, not 1. There was feasting and dancing and drinking contests. Rupert wisely sat those out. And at the end, as the sun set over a field that had never seen such celebration, Moksha took Rupert's hand and led him to the center of the clan. "In Orc tradition," she announced, "claim is completed with gift exchange. I give you my life blade." She presented a dagger, worn and well used. "I give you my clan name. I give you my protection, my strength, my loyalty." She paused. "And I give you my heart, which you've carried unknowingly for 5 years." Rupert looked at the gifts, at the clan watching, at Moksha, waiting. "I don't have a blade," he said quietly. "Don't have a clan name. Don't have strength or riches or anything worth giving." "Then what do you give?" someone called from the crowd. Rupert reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved figure. A chicken, crude and simple, whittled over long winter nights when he had nothing else to do. "I give you this," he said, holding it out to Moksha. "I carved it last winter. It's not valuable, it's not impressive, but it's made from a tree that grows on my land, shaped with my hands, and it's honest." He paused. "I give you my home, such as it is, my land, small as it is, my life, simple as it is, and my heart, which stopped being mine the moment you said he is mine, and made me believe I could be someone worth choosing." Moksha took the carved chicken, cradling it like it was made of gold. "It's perfect," she whispered. "It's a wooden chicken," Rupert said. "It's perfect," she repeated. Then she kissed him, right there in front of her entire clan, and the cheering could probably be heard 3 villages over. They didn't live happily ever after. Not perfectly, not easily. Rupert struggled with Orc traditions he didn't understand. Moksha struggled with human customs that made no sense to her. The clan took years to fully accept him. Other humans thought he'd betrayed his kind. They faced prejudice from both worlds, judgment from all sides. But they had each other, and a small cabin that became a meeting ground between 2 cultures, and 3 chickens that Moksha insisted on naming after famous warriors, and a wooden chicken carving that sat on the mantel like a treasure, and a blood-stained cloth that Moksha still carried, now tied around their joined hands during quiet moments when the world felt too heavy. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Rupert would tell them about a storm, about 4 warriors at his door, about a cloth stained with blood and kindness. And Moksha would add the part he always left out, that he'd said yes when yes made no sense, when yes was terrifying, when yes was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. "So you claimed father because he saved your life?" their daughter would ask. "No," Moksha would say, looking at Rupert with eyes that still carried sunrise. "I claimed him because he made me believe that saving an enemy was just what anyone should do. And if that's just what anyone should do, then maybe the world didn't have to be divided into green and not green. Maybe there was another way." She paused. "He gave me more than life that day. He gave me hope that the world could be different." "And what did Mother give you, Father?" their son would ask. Rupert would look at his family, at the cabin that had become a home, at the children who were proof that different worlds could make something beautiful, at the life he never expected but couldn't imagine without. "Everything," he'd say simply. "She gave me everything." The wooden chicken still sat on the mantel. The blood-stained cloth still hung above their bed. And on stormy nights, when rain hammered the roof and wind tried to break their walls, Rupert and Moksha would hold hands and remember the night when a storm brought them together, when a life debt became love, when a claim became choice, when a poor farmer with nothing and a warrior with everything met in the middle and discovered they both had exactly what the other needed. In the end, the story wasn't about orcs or humans, wasn't about cultural differences or impossible love. It was about 2 people who looked at each other across a vast divide and decided that the only thing that really mattered was the bridge they could build together. One blood-stained cloth at a time, one carved chicken at a time, one yes at a time. And sometimes, on quiet nights, Moksha would whisper the words that changed everything. "He is mine." And Rupert would whisper back, "And I always will be." Because some claims are forever, some debts are paid in love, and some storms bring exactly what you need, even when you didn't know you needed it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, If you felt the weight of that blood-stained cloth or the power of choosing love across impossible divides, please hit that like button and subscribe to the Orcbound Tales channel for more stories that break boundaries and touch hearts. Share this with someone who believes in love that transcends worlds. And drop a comment telling us, what would you do if warriors appeared at your door during a storm? Next time, we explore what happens when the prejudice against their union turns deadly, and Moksha must choose between her clan and the human she claimed. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the bravest thing you can do is say yes when yes makes no sense. Because sometimes nonsense is exactly what changes everything.